Because of those technical difficulties, it is possible that nobody's hearing me say anything right now. However, on YouTube, when you schedule a YouTube live, it sort of automatically gets things going. So if you are on YouTube right now, you might be looking at me talking about this, which is basically me killing some time because we're setting up our Instagram and our Facebook Live. But I don't want you to feel lonely and left out there in the YouTube universe. So I'm talking to you, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep talking because well, talking is something I do quite naturally, perhaps a bit too naturally. And I am going to keep talking to you until somebody points at me. Probably my friend JJ Diaz, who is our producer, will point at me, and then I will commence the official finding answers to questions that matter. At that point, after I've been pointed at, we will be live on Instagram and Facebook as well as YouTube. So I have not been pointed at yet. So so if you are on YouTube, you are probably thinking, wow, this better be good if I'm going to soldier through this foolishness of this man who's talking to me about absolutely nothing. However, Seinfeld, if you are familiar with Seinfeld, was one of the most popular sitcom history, and it was about absolutely nothing. So I am. Have I been pointed at, guys? Facebook and YouTube. All right. So we are going to be a non-starter on Instagram today. Is that how it's going to be? All right. So welcome to Facebook and welcome to YouTube. We are going live and we are going to find the answers to some questions that matter. If you've never been with us before, my name is Roy, and I am one of the pastors here at Northstar.Church. And my producer with me is my good friend JJ Diaz. So let's switch over to JJ. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great, man. Glad to be here. I'm pumped.
All right.
Pumped,
All
man.
right.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm almost pumped. I'm a little old to be pumped, honestly. Back when I was in my 20s, I pumped a little a little easier than I do now. It's a little more a little like I need one of those actual pump machines to be pumped up. So all right, so we're going to get things started. As if you've ever been with us before, you know we're answering questions that have been posed to us previously, but if you are live with us right now, you can actually ask your question in the comments, and my friend JJ will let me know about it, and we will try to find an answer from God in His Word to whatever your question is. But I'm going to kick things off today. My friend Charlene Hodge actually asked me a question, and she put it on a post-it note. Now that is seriously old school. You gotta respect the post-it note. And so what I did is I took a picture of the post-it note because I regularly lose everything that's handed to me. So here's the question, and it's a really good question. It says, since Jesus was sinless, was it easier for him to say no to temptation? What a great question. Since Jesus was sinless, was it easier for him to say no to temptation? So let's look at the Jesus part of that. It's always good to start with Jesus. So in Hebrews, if you want to get your Bible out, and by the way, we'd love for you to bring your Bible to these little excursions. I think it's Hebrew 4, somewhere near the end of the chapter. Oh, yes, here it is. So this is Hebrews 4, and we're going to start in verse 15. So this is what the writer of Hebrews says. He says, for we do not have a high priest. Now he's talking about Jesus, our high priest, who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses. But we have one who was tempted in every way, just as we are, yet without sin. So what he's saying is Jesus was tempted in every way, like we are, yet he never sinned. And now the consequence of this, and this is great news. Actually, I'm not a huge King James version kind of guy because there's a lot of these and thous. I'm not in England in 1611, so there's a lot of words I don't really say much or understand. But I love how the King James translates this. It says, "He is not he he is touched by the feelings of our infirmities." Let me just say that once more. Jesus is touched by the feelings of your infirmities, because he was tempted exactly the way that you and I are. And so the consequence of that is verse 16, let us approach the throne of grace. Isn't that great? It's not the throne of what you deserve. It's the throne of grace with confidence that we can find mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. And he's talking about in our time of need and temptation. And when I'm tempted, especially if I give into temptation, like the person I want to avoid the most is God, but he's the one I need the most. And so he's saying, look, Jesus felt the pressure of temptation just like we did. And so we can go to God, we can go to this throne of grace, and we can go with confidence and we can find what we need, which is mercy and grace. So that answers part of the question, which is Jesus was tempted just like we are. But her question goes a little deeper because was it easier for him to resist temptation because he was without sin? So that's a great question. So to answer that, there's a verse in James. I like to go to James 1. James 1, I don't know where it is, like around 13, 14, something like that. Oh my goodness, I nailed it, and I was just guessing. It's verse 13. So what I want to do is I want to look at the nature of temptation and apply that to Jesus and then to us. Okay. So verse 13 says, when tempted, no one should say, God is tempted me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. Okay. So JJ, I'm going to bring you in on this. Let's do a little discussion. So JJ, why do you think God cannot be tempted by evil?
Because he is unholy.
Okay.
And there is absolutely no darkness in him.
Okay.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Go ahead. So he's holy. There's no darkness in him. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So why would temptation not appeal to God?
He just doesn't associate with it.
Okay. He doesn't associate with it. I'm going to turn off my notifications there.
I think, I don't know. I just feel like that's just somewhere, a safe place we can find it, righteous, and he just doesn't. There's no.
Okay.
And yeah, that's
all right. No, that's good. That's good. So I asked you the question too early in the verse. I probably should have asked it to you a little later in the verse, because we actually get some insight into why that is as we continue on. In verse 14, it says, each one is tempted when by his own evil desire he's dragged away and enticed. So the word that we translate evil desire, at least in the NIV translates it that way. Some versions translate it lust, but all of that is a little misleading, because we usually think about evil desires being desires for something that's bad. But this word does not mean that. In the Greek, this letter was originally written in Greek, and the Greek word literally means over desires. So it's not that it's something bad that is desired, it's that something good is desired too much. So let's say a craving for attention, right? There's nothing wrong with wanting people to like you. That's not a bad thing. In fact, you should you shouldn't just decide, well, I'm going to be a jerk. I don't care what people think of me, right? That's a bad thing. But if you desire, let's say, even your spouse or your good friends to approve of you, in and of itself, that's fine. But if you take it too far, like you over desire their approval, then it becomes a problem. So look at what he said. He said, this is how temptation works. When your own desire, and even desire too much for something good, like it could be food, it could be attention, it could be to do well at your job, it could be for your kids to do well, it could be anything. That's good. But when you desire it too much, it says he's dragged away and enticed. So without that desire, to want something, to make it more desirous or you to crave it more than you do even God, then that's when this thing, whatever it is, it has to connect with your desire. And once it connects with your desire, it can drag you away. It's like bait for a fish. Like the fish wants the worm, and he wants the worm so much that he doesn't worry about being hooked there anywhere. And so he's hooked, he's dragged away, and he's enticed. So the reason that God cannot be hooked by sin is because he sees through it. So God, sin above everything else is stupid. Like, if you really look at what God has to offer and what food or vegging on the couch watching TV too much or whatever it is, if you could really see God and how God satisfies and whatever this thing is and how it cannot satisfy you, it would have no power. It couldn't drag you away. It couldn't entice you. And the reason that God cannot sin or even be tempted is because he sees through all these things and he realizes that without God, they're empty. So Jesus and then it gives you the progress in verse 15. Then after sin has conceived, so I'm sorry, after desire has conceived. So you have this desire for something. It might be good, but it's an over desire. It's too much. Well, then it can drag you away and become sinful. So now you act on this desire and gives birth to sin. And sin, when it's full grown, it leads to death. So the reason that God can't be tempted by sin or by any desire is because he sees through it. And so Jesus was clear enough, he was smart enough to realize that all these temptations, every one that you've ever had, Jesus had a similar or same temptation, at least in its foundation. And so let's take a guy who's tempted to lust after a woman. Jesus was tempted to lust after women, but Jesus was smart enough to look at a woman as an object to gratify your own desires on. Like that wasn't attractive to him because the women that he saw in his life, he saw them as the beautiful creation and soul that God made them to be. And so he had there was no desire within him to demean them in that way. And so every temptation that comes to us came to Jesus. But I would now this is my opinion, okay? My opinion is based on what we know about how temptation works, that Jesus would have seen through the deceptiveness of that desire, that over desire, and he just wasn't interested. He wasn't interested in demeaning a woman. He wasn't interested in using food to comfort himself. He wasn't interested in finding his significance in whether the Pharisees or any other person like approved of him or not. So my opinion, only my opinion, would be that it probably was easier for Jesus to resist those temptations because he could see them for what they are, and we're often deceived by them. All right. So, Jake, any questions that arose while I was rambling on there that we need to get to before I pull a question out of the box here?
Yes, there is actually one.
All right.
Charlie, it says, since Adam was created by God,
By the way, thank you, Charlene, so much for your question. That's a follow-up question to the first question, the Post-it note question. So read that one more time to me, JJ. Since Adam,
it says, since Adam was created by God, was he sinless?
okay, when Adam was created by God, he was perfect. So let's head on over to Genesis. I think that's Genesis 2.
Yeah.
Genesis 2. All right. Where did he create man? Uh, all right.
Oh,
Okay.
It's Genesis 1.
Genesis 1. All right, that's
Yeah.
right. Eve made an appearance in Genesis 2. All right. So what verse, JJ, are we going to for?
Um,
Oh, okay.
I think it's,
Verse 27.
yes. Yep.
Let's start in verse 26. Then God said, "Let us make man in our own image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over the earth, over the creatures that move along the ground." So man was created in God's image and in God's likeness. JJ, do you think we could conclude from that he was created sinless? What do you think? Go ahead. Go
Yes.
ahead. I know, with
That's
a
a good.
question mark on the end, right?
Yeah, that's a
Like
good
that
question.
isn't this is one of the great mysteries of God and his creation of mankind, in that we know that God is sinless. And so if man was created in God's image, as you would think it would include being sinless. And in the beginning, he was sinless, but then we also know the end of the story, right? We read ahead
Yeah.
and we know, well, but he sinned. So let's move. So, and by the way, it says God created man in his image, and he created a male and female, um, and he said that it was good. So let's look uh, to verse next chapter, chapter 2. And God commanded the man, verse 16, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will surely die." So now this is a great mystery. And as we're trying to find answers to something this nuanced and complex, um, we, I mean, this is like I'm inadequate to answer the implications of the question. So he was created, it seems, in God's image and sinless, but apparently part of being created in God's image is to have the freedom, the dignity to choose. And that means to choose to accept or to reject God. And so some people would argue, well, but when God created the choice, which is the tree for man to either choose to obey God or disobey God, to accept God as good, and that he provided everything that Adam needed to flourish, um, but that he also created an opportunity for Adam to reject that. Some people would say, well, but that means that didn't God arrange for the sin? Well, no. What God arranged for was for man and woman to have the dignity to choose. Because if they did not have the dignity created in them to choose right and wrong, to accept or to reject God, then they would not have been in God's image. Now, obviously, since they sinned, they didn't have the character, or I would even say the intelligence to choose God over disobedience to God. And so that's when everything went horribly wrong. I want to close out today with Ephesians 4. You want to go to Ephesians 4? We're going to go to verse 22. Because I want to point out that the decision that Adam and Eve made to choose disobedience over obedience to a God who is love is just plain stupid. Like, there was a lie, there was a promise that Satan offered, which was your life can be better. God's holding out on you. There's something better. Go for that. And in Ephesians 4:22, it says, "You were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is," now listen to this, "being corrupted by its deceitful desires." You know what the power of sin is? power of sin is that it promises you something. And it promises you, if you will just do this, if you will, instead of honoring God's structure for sex and marriage, choose to sexually express yourself only within the lifelong commitment of marriage, like sin says, no, that's gonna you're if you do that, you won't have the fun that you could have. You won't have the self-expression that you want. And so it offers you a promise. Your life will be better if you ignore what God has said. You know, you're in a situation where if you tell the truth, you might have to pay some consequences. And so sin promises something. Hey, if you just shade the truth, then your life will be better. So sin is above everything else stupid. It's saying, I will choose a path that promises me this short-term gratification or goodness. And by doing that, I turn away from what God says is good. And turning away from what God says is good to do what I think is good or someone promises me is good is just plain stupid. That's the power of sin. It's deceitful. It promises you something that it can't deliver on. So I'm going to end it here. We're at minute 21. Thanks for tuning in. We are going to take a bit of a break. So we won't be here back next Wednesday. We're going to take a bit of a break, and I think we're going to start things up maybe in a different way. And we'll let you know ahead of time when we're going to do that and how we're going to do that. But JJ, thanks for helping out today. Thanks everybody for their questions and for participating with us. Have a fantastic